Hey y'all, and welcome to Round 1, Bout 11 of the 2019 Master Marzen competition. Today's bout sees Due South of Boynton Beach, Florida take on Ranger Creek of San Antonio, Texas. The Master Marzen was my idea to pit 32 of America's top craft breweries against each other in a battle for supremacy in the Oktoberfest category. In each bout, the two beers go head-to-head on 5 criteria, with the winner progressing until there is only one overall champion to be crowned the Master Marzen. Those 5 criteria are packaging design, aroma, flavor, body, and the people's choice. Let's get started with criteria number 1, packaging design. So starting with Due South. They have very much gone for the typical Oktoberfest motif of the blue and white or the two-tone blue checking, kind of with a more modern twist on it, lots of clean lines and some overlaid separation there. All in all, it's a pretty nice looking can, if I do say so myself. On the flip side, Ranger Creek from San Antonio, Texas have gone for more of a color palette that is tied to Oktoberfest, that being the sort of royal blue and the orange. But in doing so, they haven't really incorporated any of the check that you typically see from an Oktoberfest style beer. So in picking my favorite, point number 1 goes to Due South. I like the way that they've sort of taken the traditional elements of the Oktoberfest and they have matched it with a more sort of clean style. So going into criteria 2, Due South is in the lead 1-0. Criteria 2 through 4 require me to actually drink the beer, so let's go ahead and get them in glass. Alright, so criteria number 2 is aroma. Let's give them a smell and see what they've got to offer. On to the Due South. So the Due South is interesting. It has elements of what you would expect from an Oktoberfest, that sort of toasted maltiness, but it is sort of very subtle and kind of thin in the aroma department. Makes me wonder what kind of flavor I'm going to get out of this beer. And let's see what Ranger Creek has to offer. The Ranger Creek has a much more robust, malty aroma to it, and honestly, it smells like it should look a lot darker than it does. It's going to be, again, really interesting to see what the flavor profile is like, but I'm getting a lot more of the typical maltiness and what I really enjoy about Marzen out of the Ranger Creek. So we're going to call this 1 apiece, moving into criteria number 3. Criteria 3 is my favorite. That would be flavor. So let's see what the beers have to offer. So the flavor profile in Due South is really interesting. It has that toasted maltiness that you would expect, but it's not quite as deep as you might expect. That said, it is really well balanced, and you get a very solid flavor from the front end to the back end, and then into the aftertaste as well. You get this sort of mildish flavor, I guess is the way to describe it, but it's very consistent, and even now, 30 seconds down the line, not having any issues there. Okay, Ranger Creek. So it's bready and it's sweet, and it's very malty. It doesn't have that toasted malt flavor, but it has a much stronger flavor overall than the Due South. It's a very tasty beer, and actually, in the aftertaste, there's a certain amount of toasted malt to it. So that would have been a drawback if it wasn't there, but I don't know, it's kind of toasty on the back end. Honestly, I'm inclined to give this point to Ranger Creek as well. So they go ahead 2-1, going into criteria number 4, which is body. Alrighty, so when we are talking about the body of a beer, we're generally looking at 3-ish criteria. The first one for me is the head. Does it build one, and does it retain? Number 2 would be lacing down the side of the glass, and number 3, which is honestly the most important, would be mouthfeel, thickness, general experience when you're drinking the beer. So surprisingly, the 2 beers have a fairly similar mouthfeel. There isn't a whole lot separating them there. If you remember a little earlier in the video, the Due South built a much larger head, and it retained for a lot longer period of time. And just looking at the rim of the glass here, you can see there's a certain amount of lacing on this side, which is a pretty nice sign. And on the flip side, the Ranger Creek isn't really lacing at all. So in a situation where the mouthfeel is almost the same, the head retention and the lacing become a much bigger deal. And the obvious winner for this criteria is Due South. So heading into the final criteria, we are tied at 2 apiece. Alrighty, so criteria number 5 is the people's choice, and that is an opportunity for you, the audience, to go ahead and actually impact the decision-making process. In a situation like this, where we're tied at 2 apiece, it really comes down to who gets the most love on social media. If you follow me on Instagram at Sargent Suds, you'll see that I actually post polls for every bout at every round on my page, and you can decide who you think is the better option, and it might just make the difference. As you can see here on the screen, this one was a bit of a one-sided competition. Ranger Creek with 75% of the vote versus Due South's 25% of the vote. And for those playing at home, that was 41 votes to 14, with Ranger Creek taking the 5th criteria, and that's going to give them the win overall, 3-2. So with that, Ranger Creek will progress the next round, where they will take on Dust Bowl in their next matchup. Alrighty, y'all. Well, I hope you enjoyed that. If you did, do me a favor and go ahead and give this a like. And if you are not currently subscribed, I would really appreciate if you did. We're still sort of in the middle of the first round. There's a lot more beer drinking to go. So if you're interested in seeing the results of this tournament, I do suggest that you go ahead and subscribe so you can stay abreast of all the things that are happening inside the Monster Marzen 2019. Until next time, Prost.